That'll do. Good morning, welcome to California, and welcome to the Guntherwerks 993 Speedster. So hello, welcome back to the channel, welcome to California, and welcome to Guntherwerks HQ. Now in the coming days we're going to be spending quite a lot of time with these guys, and we're going to give you a walk and talk of their incredible facility. But before we do, we're going to be taking you for an immersive first drive in this, the Guntherwerks 993 Speedster. Now if you follow the channel regularly, you may remember that back in the UK a few months ago, we had the honor of driving the coupe, which somewhat reconfigured my smile glands. It was one of the best cars that I drove last year, and today we get to recreate that experience with some hot tarmac, importantly with the roof off. So we're going to give you a top line overview of what this car is all about, and then really this is all about the drive, and we're going to immerse you in one of the most incredible air-cooled, high-revving, naturally aspirated engines that you can have the pleasure of experiencing. But first of all, what is this? Well, 993 engine has been upgraded from 3.6 to 4 litre. It's around about 435 horsepower. But what's important here is actually the power to weight ratio. The car, wet, running with fluids, around about 1,150 kilograms, which by modern day standards is absolutely bonkers. And a lot of that is in part to every external panel on this car being, you guessed it, carbon fiber. The weight saving is substantial. Now then, on this particular car, it is running the substantial Brembo steel brakes. Sure, they've got some incredible stopping power, but it is an optional extra to have the carbon ceramics as well if you want to go for that improved unsprung mass and even further weight saving. Now, when we say this is a Speedster and there's no roof, I mean there's no roof. There's not even a tonneau cover or a little tent to put on it. There is literally no roof engineered for this car. What's fascinating about that is the structural rigidity of the Speedster is actually superior to that of the coupe, thanks to extra torsional rigidity that they've managed to engineer into the car and still keep it that super lightweight figure. I don't know how they've done it, but for a Speedster to have torsional rigidity better than a coupe is impressive in itself. So absolutely no roof, but also no windows either. Not retracted into the door, they're not wound down. Literally the windows in this car do not exist, and that is a tip of the hat to Speedsters of old. So they've gone full send, full commitment on the true Speedster experience. So fun fact on the whole roofless thing is that the windscreen on this is actually a genuine 964 original Speedster windscreen. And you're probably thinking, how did they manage to achieve that? Well, the production numbers of these cars are just 25 units. As it happens, they're all sold out, but Guntherwerks managed to get in touch with Porsche and bought all of the remaining Speedster windscreens which they had in stock. These are super cool, and it's all in the detail with these cars. These are, or at least the sort of backing and mounting plate. This is a single piece of aluminium, billet crafted in-house by Guntherwerks. And anyone who remembers the concept or prototype of the 991 Speedster, they originally launched with wing mirrors just like that. Sadly, they never made it to that car, but thankfully, they're about to make it on this car. All right, now this is really, as far as I'm concerned, the business end of the car. You've just had a subtle audible sample of what this thing sounds like, but honestly, speakers, camera, microphone, whatever, does not do this thing justice. It's absolutely sensational. Now, I'm going to actually draw attention to the fan to begin with. Now, I know this doesn't sound like a big component, but this fan has actually been entirely redesigned. You see, Guntherwerks partnered with someone that we can't tell you about, but what they effectively did was ran it through a very sophisticated algorithm and came up with a much more efficient profile for the fan. So this is the most efficient layout and angle of louvres in which to supply that engine with the most efficient flow of air possible, which has contributed to it developing around about 435 horsepower from an air-cooled, naturally aspirated engine, which, if you speak to the internet forums, they reckon it wasn't possible until these guys have done it. When I said wasn't possible, trying to achieve 100 horsepower per litre from an air-cooled engine is really hard stuff. That is what it looks like. So 7,800 RPM, 435 horsepower, completely naturally aspirated. In a minute, I'll tell you what this thing feels like, because I ended up changing gears for no reason at all, just to hear it. Now, I want to draw your attention to these, the Jrz Suspension System. Now, these have a proprietary algorithm which adjusts itself in milliseconds based on the surface of the road which it is reading. And that makes everything from road handling, compliance, just trying to maintain the best contact patch of those massive tires with the road at all times, but also trying to make it supple enough to absorb the undulations and bumps of a road rather than being too stiff and sort of skipping over it. So very trick indeed. Speaking of trick, check out this feature here. Little secret compartments. Then if you want to have some champagne installed in there or whatever, keep your small accessories in there. That's a little extra complementing space that you can add on to the boot capacity in the front. All right, now that Jrz suspension, as I mentioned, is linked to an app on a phone in the car, which allows you to control its various suspension settings. So its default is comfort. I believe default is actually its track mode. So that's where things get a little bit stiffer, and then sport stiffens things up for a more sporty road biased drive. The size of the tires, these are 335 30 section at the rear, which, you know, for most sports cars, supercars these days, at least thoroughbred ones, is relatively standard procedure. The fronts, however, this blows my mind. The fronts are 295 section. It's just ridiculous. The size of it is huge. So I'm excited to share with you what the front end turn-in on this thing feels like. Today, we're going to head up into the canyons. It's about 35 degrees out and it's sticky hot asphalt. So in a minute, we're going to immerse you in what a 295 section front feels like on some grippy tarmac. Yes, that'll do. Welcome to California and welcome to the Guntherwerks 993 Speedster. What a sensual machine. Air-cooled, naturally aspirated, light, dexterous, pure, raw, theatrical, quite literally the wind in your hair. This car, let's just start with the fundamentals, the weight of it. In kilograms, around about 1,150-ish kilograms wet operating weight, with 435 brake horsepower, which means its power to weight ratio is disproportionately in favor of many smiles per gallon. Now it revs to 7,800, but it feels like it revs to 9,800, the crescendo. Listen to this. Yes! Absolutely ridiculous. Honestly, it's just such a wonderful sense of occasion. Now then, the engine has been substantially revised, as I'm sure you can probably tell, but the significance of this is it has been uprated from 3.6 to a 4-litre engine. The way this thing builds momentum is glorious, and it pulls and pulls and pulls in a really linear fashion. You can also probably tell that I'm changing gear for absolutely no reason at all other than the sheer pleasure of interacting with this sublime gearbox. Now, things which are quite hard to convey on camera are things like weight and feel and feedback, but what Guntherwerks do a fantastic job of is weight matching. What I mean by that is there are primary attributes in a driver's car, particularly manual driver's cars, that you interact with, which is the clutch, the brake pedal, the throttle pedal, the steering weight, and the weight of the throw of the gear shifter itself. And if you have one of those, which is slightly mismatched in its weighting, or the way that it feels when you interact with it, something doesn't quite feel right with one of them, whether that's the feedback under heavy braking or the weight of the clutch. But in this, everything is very well weighted and matched, so that the steering input and the depression of the clutch and the throw of the gear stick, like so, all feels like one harmonious movement. And that's why you change gear for no reason at all, because as humans, we are a big bag of sensory receptors. We're nerves. And when something so organic and mechanical as this clicks into place, it pleases us greatly. It stimulates every one of those sensory receptors and says, can I have some more of that, please? That's actually artistry. Engineering is one thing, but the human element, stimulating the human element, is a massive part of it. And this thing, I mean, listen to the throttle pickup. The flywheel feels almost non-existent. It's so free revving. And the sound, I mean, come on. The sound. Not only is it naturally aspirated, it's air cooled. There is definitely a purity to that in itself. What a machine. Now let's just talk about handling and turning. This reminds me, and don't forget this car's based on a 993 platform, okay? Obviously entirely reworked, but just for some context, the front end of this car turns in like a race car on slicks. The closest thing I could probably relate this to in terms of modern day car feel, with regards to specifically the bite of the front end, is the new 992 GT3, which has rear wheel steering. It has double wishbone front end on it, which is a first for a GT product on a 911, and it has the benefit of fresh compound technology in the form of a Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 or a Cup 2R, and believe me when I say that thing bites in with the ferocity of a very angry mosquito. This thing does exactly the same thing. It's like a race car feel, but it doesn't seem to tramline as much as you might expect, which is saying something, because it has, wait for it, 295 section front tires. So when I say it feels like a race car front end, it's because it kind of has a race car front end. Now then, there is a, for want of a better word, sport button down here. If I press this now, daily driver. Settles everything off. There's an actual remap of the car's ECU, which changes the driving characteristics of the car. You can immediately hear the difference in exhaust tone. So if you do want to sort of dial off some of that rawness, the difference this button makes, you ready? Softens it all off. And let's just talk brakes and traction. You see, there's no ABS and there's no traction control. Now thankfully, we're on hot sticky asphalt up here in the hills, which means these 295 section fronts are full of heat. So organic or mechanical grip is available in plenty. And then the Brembo brakes. Now the modulation of them is wonderful. There's a lot of confidence, very reassuring, but ultimately there's no ABS. So if you punch hard enough, you could end up locking them up. But for me, that's the sort of, it's the height of analog, isn't it? It's being able to modulate to the point of natural adhesion running out, both under traction and braking. So you're able to play with the friction levels yourself. That's really nice. At least when it's hot and sticky. Maybe on a December's day in the UK, not so much, but up here, phenomenal experience. focuses the mind to know that everything I'm doing, all this ground that I'm covering, the way I'm hustling this thing, it's this wonderful crescendo of interactivity and components coming together, and it's a symphony of mechanical epicness. When you can thread it down a road like this, picking apart the road, you're still playing with the physics of it like a traditional 911, because ultimately there is still a load of weight out the back. But because the front's got so much grip, you don't quite have to trail brake it in as hard as you might do on a standard 993, and it does feel a better balanced car for it. I mean, understeer isn't really a word in Guntherwerks vocabulary. It just hucks up, kind of no matter what you throw at it. Now obviously, we are in an incredibly perfect driving environment. It's a hot day, but the chances are, if you're going to be buying a car with no roof, you're going to be driving it and experiencing it in an environment that is conducive to such a lifestyle. And the chances are your tires aren't even going to see rain, are they? And here's the other thing, right? Because there's no new age electronic intervention anywhere, so the way that you can play with the throttle and the brake, I mean, you can left foot brake under a mild throttle just to tuck the nose in. Just allows you to throw weight over the front without having to lift off the throttle. And there's no intrusive ECU to say, no, you can't do that. That's what gets this going. You're manipulating physics. That's what it's all about.